Hey, thank you for coming back to my channel. Today I want to talk about the disadvantages to bringing a child overseas with you, especially if you're a single mom. Now, in the last video, I talked about the advantages of raising a child overseas. Now, don't get me wrong, I think there are amazing opportunities to raising a child abroad. However, I have recognized quite a few disadvantages to doing it from experience, and I just wanted to share those things with you just in case you were considering bringing your child. The first thing is being away from family. Now, I would say this is probably the number one hardest thing that both I had to deal with and my son had to deal with. Being away from family is really hard. You have to not only, deal with the distance, but not seeing them or talking to them regularly, especially if you have a pretty close-knit family. And for a young child, that could be pretty devastating, especially in their early years, because if they grew up around family members and they were used to seeing those family members regularly, and then they went from seeing them twice a year, it can be very hard. And more specifically, especially if you're a single mom, you are more than likely split from the father, possibly, maybe not, and the child may have a really good relationship with the father. And being away from the dad can really cause a lot of emotional side effects for the child, and it can break up a bond. And I believe, especially for sons, that if the father really wants to make an effort to be in their child's life, that you should also meet them halfway. I believe that every child should have the opportunity to have a relationship with both parents until they're at an age where they can make the decision for themselves. Number two is stability. More than likely, you are coming overseas and you are on a contract. Now, we all know the contracts are temporary and things are bound to break or end. And if you're expecting, let's say, a long-term commitment to your overseas life, that's great. But what happens if that contract doesn't work out? Well, guess what? Your child also has to deal with the side effects of moving from one place to the next. And, they may build friendships in one school and then have to leave and then have to start completely over. And at a certain age, that gets really, really difficult. Children get to an age where they want to start developing those relationships with their peers, and it just becomes more beneficial for them to stay in one place. And the next thing is that it can be very, very expensive. Now, I strongly recommend that if you are considering a move overseas and you've been offered a contract, you really look at the fine lines of what it offers in terms of your child. Some contracts will offer plane tickets, medical insurance coverage, tuition, all of these wonderful benefits, and some may not. So you really need to do your research before making a commitment to make sure that it is suitable for you financially in the long run. I know that when I was in the UAE with my son, that contract did not cover the tuition, unfortunately. Uniforms and books and lunch and extracurricular activities, so everything adds up. Support is another huge factor, especially for single mothers. I know when I lived in the States that I had my village around me to help me with my son. And putting myself through school, I was working a full-time job, and I was a very new mom. And it really, really made a difference. When you come overseas, you're literally uprooting your life and moving to a completely new environment with new people. And you have to make adjustments. And then you have to trust somebody with your child. And that can be hard for some of us. But it had to happen because I had things to do, commitments for work, and I may have wanted to have a social life. So that's one thing that I didn't necessarily prepare for ahead of time, was gauging out who would I have for support while I was there. And I really missed out on a lot. But what was a really good benefit, though, I will say this, is that I was able to meet a lot of other mothers that were in the same predicament as me. They were single, they had a child, and we usually have play dates together, we get our kids together. So it worked out in my benefit. Someone either that you know personally that can help you with the support, because you are definitely going to need it. The last thing that I want to bring up, that was a school that my son attended. Now, it really, again, this depends on where you're located. In some countries, depending on your religious background, your belief system, it may be in line with that. But I was in a Muslim country, and the school that I sent my son to was an American curriculum with primarily American administrators, but there were a lot of Egyptian, a lot of Emirati, and a lot of Middle Eastern teachers there. And they had different values, and there was a lot of different prejudices also associated with those values. I'll give you an example. So one day, my son comes home and tells me, "Mom, my teacher hit me." Now I know what you're saying, Mom, if you're anything like me, you didn't even want to hear the rest of the story. You were ready to go and confront who this teacher was and, get right down to business, right? So that was my whole thing. I was just furious beyond words that somebody thought that it was okay to put their hands on my child. The teacher was Egyptian, Muslim, and that was the way that he was taught to discipline. I think my son didn't turn his homework assignment in, or he might have been talking to a friend. Either way, it does not give you any type of validation to put your hands on my son. I confronted the administration about it. Mind you, they're American. There were also some Emirati administrators. Do you know that I wasn't able to get justice from that situation? There wasn't a board of directors in place. There wasn't a superintendent. There wasn't anybody really in place to help me get any type of support for that situation. And it was kind of like swept under the rug, as if it just like a hush hush, don't say anything.
I really wanted to pull my son out of school, so it took every bit of ounce of strength not to do that, because I knew that my son needed stability at the school. He had friends, and he needed to finish the year.
If I was in the States, I would have had other ways to be able to speak up and fight back, legally even. And there, I felt that I had no voice. I think it strongly had to do with the color of his skin. Don't get me wrong, I know this happens in the States. Our children are racially profiled and they are picked on, but there is still justice for those situations. I would definitely research the school, research the administration, get to know them, get to know their policies and their procedures, and get to know what your rights are as a parent. And that's something that I did not do. And that was a disadvantage for me. These are my instances. They don't necessarily have to be your instances. Everybody's situation is different. Everything will work out for the good. Do your research, do your research, do your research, and be very smart about your approach to what country works best for you and your child. Until next time, be blessed, be highly favored, and I'll see you on the next video.
Make sure to subscribe, like, and comment, and check out my blog at MrBlackExpat.com.